Well, I just wanted to start by thanking you all for inviting me here. It's a real privilege to be with Tracy and Elise, and thank you, Ron, for the opportunities you've given me over the years in appearing in AQR. And it's great to be at an event that's celebrating the magazine in its entirety. It's a great effort that you put out. I certainly appreciate the opportunities you've given me. Speaking of AQR, I'm going to read from a story that's in the current issue. It's called Mother's House. It takes place in Afghanistan. It's about a woman who owns a restaurant and uses the proceeds to fund a detox center for Afghan war veterans. At the same time, when I met her, she was trying to get her children into Europe with the help of a smuggler. Mother's House. The Taj Begum restaurant stands behind a gate on an exhausted dirt road in Kabul, the crumpled asphalt exposing rocks and tree roots and gaping potholes. Passers-by, burdened by the intense heat of an August afternoon, walk on the road until they reach a stretch of sidewalk that has somehow survived its own ruin. On rainy days, muddy water fills immense craters cars can do little to avoid, slaloming around one only to sink into another with a horrible bang of the undercarriage, sending geysers of filth and dousing anyone, on this morning me, outside the closed metal gates of the restaurant. Upon seeing me drenched and dripping, sunlight blinking off the wet concrete drive and my own soaked body, a guard hurries to let me in. He offers an apologetic smile and hands me a towel. Wiping my face, I enter a courtyard. The high white walls reduce the street noise to a whisper, and it would be easy to think that I am no longer in Kabul, but some peaceful place without war or strife of any kind. Cats dart across a lawn, and iron lanterns with stained glass throw a wavering blue and orange light that provides minimal heat for other cats to bask in, and roses stand to one side of the lanterns in pots ready to be planted. I watch a barefoot man step across the grass with a hose and amble around tables and chairs that another man washes and stacks on a brick patio. And I'm reminded of scenes from a fairy tale where elves scurry in preparation for their monarch. I intend no pejorative, but there's just something so subservient about their conduct, hurried and stooped over. The restaurant, a two-story brown brick building with white columns, like something out of America's antebellum South, casts a long, wide shadow over the laborers, enforcing the morning stillness with the quiet solemnity of its vacant windows and empty dining hall. As I hand the towel back to the guard, Layla Hadari, the proprietor, approaches me, wrapped in an orange and red sari. A scarf of the same color covers her black hair. She has a firm handshake and a warm smile, and I feel her tired eyes search my face as she sizes me up, determining whether I can be trusted. Men, I will soon learn, have not treated Layla well. I follow her to two lawn chairs and sit in the sun and observe a couple of men emerge from within the restaurant to assist the other two tending the grounds. They're all graduates of an alcohol and drug detox program Layla founded across town. The profits from Taj Begum keep the program open. Before I became a reporter, I had worked with homeless people in San Francisco. When I heard about Layla's work with addicts from a friend with Amnesty International, I decided to look her up. Don't forget the rose bushes, Layla calls to the man watering the grass. Yes, mother, he says, and jogs to the roses. All the recovering addicts call Layla mother. She compares them to eager children who want to make their parent happy. Grown men behaving like needy kids discomfort her, but she understands. Few people care about addicts. The men cling to the ones who do, their affection something so rare that it becomes almost as addictive as the drugs the addicts once used. They can't let her go. Some refuse to leave even when they complete the program. They become so used to her care that they make their way to Taj Begum and insist she continue to watch over them. Come on, Layla tells them. You're sober. You have your shops and families to return to. No, you're our mother. We're your kids, they tell her. She insists they go, but they resist, and she absorbs their profanity, their rants like spoiled children. Until exhausted, she relents and lets them stay, assigning them tasks at the restaurant. Her brother Hakeem also cursed her, but for different reasons. He became envious of her success. Hakeem had been an addict for 22 years, hooked on heroin and hashish. As a family, Layla and her parents experienced the shame of his addiction until their father banished him from the house. She remembers seeing him on the street, passed out. Alive or dead, as an addict, her brother no longer existed, no longer mattered, an unwanted non-person, just like other addicts, whom she would chronicle in the early 2000s as a documentary filmmaker. However, Layla increasingly became disillusioned with making movies. A film did not change lives. In 2010, she put aside her camera and established a 30-day drug and alcohol recovery program. She offered a house, 3 meals a day, and Narcotics Anonymous meetings. The first few clients began calling the program Mother's House, and the name stuck. Hakeem stayed for a month, and now he no longer uses. After he left, he started his own program. He considers Mother's House competition. They haven't spoken in years. 2 years after Mother's House opened, Layla tried to help addicted women, but she received so many death threats that she dropped the idea. The women and their children transported drugs and guns for the dealers they lived with, most of whom were their husbands and fathers. And the dealers confronted Layla and demanded that she stop encouraging their women to leave. You're interfering with business, they told her. One night, someone kicked in the door of her home. She woke with a start, but saw nothing. Then 2 men emerged from the dark, and one of them jumped on top of her and began choking her with a wire. Layla pushed the fingers of one hand beneath the wire, and with her other hand reached for a gun she kept by the bed. The second intruder grabbed the gun, and they struggled. Layla pulled the trigger once, twice, blasting holes in the walls, and her assailants beat her until she released the weapon and passed out. When she opened her eyes, the men were gone. Above her stood a neighbor who'd heard the commotion. When he entered Layla's house, the startled intruders shoved past him and ran outside. Layla did not call the police. An attack on a woman, even in post-Taliban Afghanistan, was of no consequence. Another time, a taxi driver offered Layla a ride as she walked to the restaurant. 3 men sat in the back seat. It is not uncommon in Afghanistan to share taxis with strangers. Layla opened the passenger door and got in. One of the men grabbed her scarf and jerked her head back and punched her, while the other men demanded that she stop helping addicts. Addicts bought the drugs, they shouted, hitting her again and again until they told the driver to stop. One of the men then stepped out and jerked Layla from the taxi, throwing her on the ground. This time she went to the police, but they did nothing. Drug dealers, she suspects, paid the police to stay out of their way. To this day, the threats have not stopped. Her phone rings in the middle of the night. When she answers, she hears only a taunting silence. She began to worry about her 2 sons, 18-year-old Murtaza and 13-year-old Mustafa, and her 15-year-old daughter, Zakia. It was one thing when they were small and stayed home, but now they are old enough to wander about Kabul as they chose. These crazy people might kidnap them or worse. In addition, the children's stepmother wanted Zakia to marry a man Layla felt was mentally unstable. Her children were just 4, 6, and 8 when Layla divorced their father, but they stayed with him because according to Sharia law, Afghan children belong to the father. He married their stepmother a short time later. She resented having the responsibility of children not her own. Some days she would lock them out of the kitchen and refuse to feed them. Layla became obsessed with worry until she arrived at a plan. She must get her children out of Afghanistan. Without criticizing his wife, Layla told her ex about the threats on her life and how their children might be affected, convincing him they would be better off in Europe. Layla then paid a smuggler to make the arrangements. She put in 1,500 euros and her husband 8,000. She coached her children on what to say at the borders they would cross. Don't tell anyone your father is alive and lives in Iran, she warned them. Say he disappeared. If border agents know your father lives in Iran, they might deport you to Tehran. Afghanistan is dangerous, Iran is not. The Europeans might think it's no problem to send you there. That would be terrible, Layla knew. Their father was a mullah. The Europeans would not understand how hard it would be for her children, especially her daughter, to live with a conservative man and his crazy wife. And because the children are part Afghan, they would suffer discrimination. Iranians consider Afghans inferior. Their father could not protect them. Murtaza, Mustafa, and Zakia left by bus 2 days before I stood soaking wet outside Taj Begum's gates. If they are on schedule, they would soon cross into Turkey. There, a man the smuggler knows has promised to help them reach Austria. You will have a hard journey, Layla told Zakia before she departed. After what we went through with our stepmother, this trip won't be so bad, Zakia replied. I'll stop there.